Marvin had taken a picture of his wife, Lena, proudly holding up her catch of the day during a peaceful fishing trip. It was supposed to be a simple, happy snapshot of their time together, but when they looked at the photo later, their smiles slowly disappeared. Instead of joy, their faces filled with confusion and disbelief. The picture showed something strange in the background, something neither of them had noticed before. What had been a sweet memory of the day suddenly felt off, as if it was hiding something unsettling. They had just gotten home after a lovely day, relaxing and enjoying a quiet evening after dinner. Everything had been perfect until that moment when a dark feeling crept into the room. "Babe, do you see that?" Lena asked. Her face had gone pale as she stared at the screen. Marvin leaned in and zoomed into the photo. His heart skipped a beat when he saw it. Just behind Lena, in the water, there was something he had caught on camera without realizing it. "I can't believe we missed that," Marvin said, eyes wide as he looked at Lena. "We have to do something, right?" she replied. "What do you want to do? "Should we go back out there or call the police?" he asked. Marvin didn't want to risk their safety, but he also knew they couldn't just brush this off and move on. They decided not to waste time. Marvin picked up his phone and quickly dialed the police. As he waited, he reached out and gently held Lena's hand, giving it a small squeeze. The phone rang, and his mind raced. What if nobody picks up? Do we have to go back there ourselves? Then finally, a voice answered. "Good evening. This is Officer Richardson. How can I help you?" Marvin sat up straight. "Hi, my name is Marvin. I was out fishing with my wife today, and we were just going through some of the photos we took, and..." The officer waited for him to go on, but didn't sound very concerned. Still, Marvin pressed forward and explained what he had seen in the picture. Something odd in the distance, behind them, out on the water. There was a pause. No response. "Sir, are you still there?" Marvin asked, wondering if the line had gone dead. "Yes, I'm here. Please hold for a moment. I'll be right back," the officer replied. Then came the dull, tinny sound of hold music. "He put me on hold," Marvin said to Lena, shaking his head, trying to hide how irritated he felt. "You'd think something like this would get their attention." "Just wait," Lena said gently. "You don't know what he's doing. I'm sure they'll take it seriously." Marvin let out a sigh and was just about to say something else when the hold music stopped. He straightened up, focused fully on the phone. He heard the officer say, "Thank you for waiting, sir. We'd like to ask you a few questions. Would you be able to come down to the station right away?" Marvin blinked in surprise. That wasn't what he expected. "Well, officer, I would, but my wife and I just had some wine with dinner, and I don't think it's a good idea for us to drive right now." The officer let out a short laugh. "That's no problem. In that case, my partner and I will come to your house instead. Can I get your address?" After ending the call, Marvin turned to Lena. "They're on their way over," he told her. He could see the worry in her eyes, so he added, "Don't stress. They just want to ask some questions. Probably want to take a better look at the photo. But don't worry, we just took the picture. That's it." Lena nodded slowly, taking a deep breath, but her expression still showed how shaken she was. "Marv, I still can't wrap my head around it," she said, sounding overwhelmed. "How did we not notice something like that? I feel like we have to go back. But what if it's already too late?" She sighed heavily and turned to the sink, starting to wash the dishes just to keep her hands busy. Marvin didn't know what to say. He just sat there, trying not to imagine worst-case scenarios. Not long after, the doorbell rang, and Marvin jumped up. He walked quickly to the door and opened it to find the officers standing there. "Officer Richardson, right?" he said, shaking his hand. "Yes, thank you. And this is Officer Brooks," Richardson replied. Marvin welcomed them in and offered them a drink, but both politely declined. "Could we see the picture you mentioned?" Officer Richardson asked. Marvin nodded and grabbed his phone. "Sure, here it is," he said, unlocking the screen and handing it over. The officer stared at it for a few moments, then his eyes widened. "Brooks, take a look at this," he said, passing the phone over. He turned back to Marvin and Lena. "And you're saying you didn't see or hear anything strange while you were out there? You only noticed this once you looked at the photo later?" The officer sighed, clearly realizing this was serious enough to require an on-site check. Without delay, he sent the photo to the station and asked them to open an investigation. He and Officer Brooks were heading straight to the spot where Marvin and Lena had taken the picture, ready to search the water as soon as they arrived. "You drive. I'll call Marine Police on the way," Officer Richardson said as they headed back to their car. Meanwhile, Marvin and Lena's peaceful evening was interrupted again, this time by a knock at the door. When they opened it, they found their neighbor Jake standing there. He looked shaken, his face tight with worry, and his sudden visit at this hour instantly filled the room with unease. "Jake, is everything okay?" Marvin asked, picking up on his anxious energy. Without wasting time, Jake got right to the point. "It's my younger brother, Daniel," he said, his voice trembling a bit. "He went out fishing a few days ago and never came back. We kept thinking maybe he just lost track of time or something. But now I don't know." "It's not like him to just vanish," Jake said, his face tight with worry. "We've been trying to stay hopeful, telling ourselves he'll walk through the door any minute, but it's been too long." He shook his head. "My family's decided we can't just sit around anymore. We're going to tell the authorities first thing in the morning. Daniel would never just leave without saying anything." As Jake shared the troubling update, Lena and Marvin exchanged a look. Something unspoken passed between them, a realization slowly starting to form. Could the strange thing they saw in their photo have anything to do with Daniel? The timing seemed too close to be a coincidence. A mix of unease and curiosity settled over them, that quiet but growing sense that something wasn't right. Lena finally broke the silence, her voice soft but steady. "Jake, there's something we think you should see." Marvin gave a small nod and reached for his phone. They couldn't be sure, but the photo might hold a clue, maybe something tied to Daniel's disappearance. Even if it wasn't clear yet, they both felt it was important to share. Lena carefully handed Jake the phone and showed him the photo they'd taken on their fishing trip. At first glance, it looked peaceful, just a calm shot of the open water, but there was something in it that had stopped Marvin and Lena cold when they first noticed it. Jake squinted as he looked, and they watched his expression closely, waiting for his reaction. Marvin leaned over and pointed. "Look, right there." He zoomed in on a spot in the distance. Something was floating, half hidden in the water. It looked like scattered debris at first, but now it felt like more than that. Arranged in a pattern, it oddly resembled an SOS signal. A chill filled the room as they realized what that might mean. Jake's face lost all color. His hands were trembling slightly as he stared at the screen. "Could it be?" he whispered, but his voice caught before he could finish. The thought that Daniel might be out there, alive, maybe stranded, and needing help, was overwhelming. The possibility was frightening, but it also gave them something to hold on to. Lena placed a hand on Jake's arm, her tone calm but hopeful. "This could be a lead," she said gently. "The photo. It might help us find him." Jake looked up at her, and for the first time in days, there was a faint flicker of hope in his eyes. The picture, however unsettling, was real, and it gave them a place to start. They sat in the room together, a heavy silence settling over them. The worry in the air was thick. What had happened to Daniel? Had he been out there all this time? Was he okay or hurt? The questions kept building, each one more urgent than the last. But the biggest one of all hung between them. Was there still time to save him? Word about the photo and Daniel's disappearance began to spread through the small coastal town like ripples in water. Phones buzzed, messages were passed along. Before long, nearly everyone in their tight-knit community had heard. Quiet concern turned to serious worry. Someone from their own town might be lost out at sea. Neighbors quickly came together, united by a shared sense of purpose. People showed up, offering whatever they could. Some formed search teams. Others brought supplies, boats, or local know-how. The feeling in the air changed. It wasn't just concern anymore, it was determination. Everyone was ready to help in whatever way they could. With the new photo as evidence, the community wasted no time. Multiple people contacted the authorities, making sure the police had all the information. The photograph, with what looked like an SOS signal in the distance, was sent along, now a key piece in the puzzle of Daniel's disappearance. The larger search effort quickly began to take shape, powered by the community's fast and determined response. As more people heard the news, the efforts grew. Fishermen brought their boats, others with drones offered to scan from above, and volunteers showed up with food and supplies to support the search teams. What started as concern had grown into full action, with one shared goal: bring Daniel home. The community stood together, stronger than ever. Differences were forgotten, and routines were put on hold. It wasn't just about helping, it was about showing up for one of their own. The way everyone came together spoke volumes about who they were. Their unity was more than just a reaction. It was a real show of how much they cared. Officers Richardson and Brooks, now joined by the Marine Police, quickly launched the sea search. They used the photo to guide their starting point and moved with purpose. Boats were checked, gear loaded, and teams briefed. The open sea stretched out ahead, holding answers they hoped to find. Everyone was focused, determined to figure out what had happened to Daniel. The team understood what they were up against. The ocean was unpredictable. Calm one moment, fierce the next. Searching these waters took serious skill and caution. As they looked out at the endless blue, the size of the task ahead hit them. They didn't have time to waste. Every minute mattered now more than ever. Carefully and thoroughly, the search teams began scanning the area. They looked for anything, any small clue that might lead them to Daniel. The mood was tense. Everyone knew how urgent this was. Time was working against them, and they could feel that pressure in every moment out there. Wind, waves, and changing currents made the search even harder. Nature wasn't going to make things easy. The crews had to keep adjusting, always alert, always on the move. It wasn't just about staying on course. It was about staying focused, despite the constant challenges nature threw their way. But even with all the obstacles, no one gave up. Every person out there stayed locked in, driven by hope and determination. They were holding on to one thing, the belief that they might still be able to bring Daniel home. That hope kept them going, no matter what the sea threw at them. Then, something caught their attention. A piece of driftwood, floating alone, was pulled from the water. It seemed ordinary, until they spotted rough markings scratched into its surface. Suddenly, the energy on board shifted. Could it be a message? Could Daniel have left this behind? The idea that he might have tried to send a sign brought new hope to everyone on the team. Carefully, they secured the driftwood, their hearts beating a little faster. The team gathered tightly around the piece of driftwood, eyes locked on the markings etched into it. Every line, every scratch was looked at closely as they tried to figure out if it was a message, and if so, what it might be saying. The pressure was heavy. If this was from Daniel, it could be a huge clue. Every second spent examining it felt important, possibly bringing them one step closer to finding him. The strange piece of wood, floating alone out in the sea, had become something more, a sign, maybe even a map. As both experts and search team members studied it and shared theories, they started to zero in on where Daniel might have ended up. The markings were unclear, but together with the photo, they helped narrow down the search area. What once seemed like a random object was now pointing them in the right direction. This discovery sparked something new in everyone. The search teams felt it. So did the people back in town. What had started to feel like a hopeless situation suddenly had a thread to pull on. The community clung to that hope, and the energy shifted. Worry was still there, but it was now mixed with determination. Everyone dug a little deeper, driven by this new sign. The marks on the wood weren't just meaningless scratches. They told a story. Daniel was trying. He was holding on, trying to communicate, refusing to give up. That thought lit a fire under the search teams. If Daniel hadn't stopped fighting, neither would they. It reminded everyone why they were out there, because he was still out there, doing everything he could to survive. Armed with both the photo and the marked driftwood, the Marine Police made a quick decision. They would widen the search area. Every boat, every set of binoculars was now focused on a larger section of the ocean. The task ahead was massive, but for the first time, they had a clearer direction. The sea was big, but their focus was even bigger. As they scanned the newly expanded area, something caught their eye. A tiny island, uninhabited and barely known, came into view. It was the kind of place people usually ignored, just a speck on the map. But in a situation like this, its isolation made it stand out. The search team couldn't ignore the possibility. Could Daniel have made it there? That single question sparked a rush of movement. Conversations broke out on every boat. If Daniel had somehow found his way to that little patch of land, they needed to get there, fast. The island, once considered unimportant, was now the center of everything. In the middle of such a huge search, this one spot gave them a direction and a reason to push harder. Wasting no time, the search crews quickly changed course. Every minute counted. The boats sped forward, slicing through the water, all heading toward the same goal. Everyone on board was bracing themselves, nervous but hopeful. Could this island finally lead them to Daniel? As the boats neared the island, its wild, untouched look stood out. The shoreline was rough, and the thick brush gave it an almost hidden feel. It looked like the kind of place people forgot about. The mystery of it only added to the tension. Was Daniel out there, waiting to be found? Or was this just another piece in the still missing puzzle? The search team slowly approached the island, every movement filled with a mix of hope and nervousness. Their eyes swept across the rough landscape, their thoughts spinning with what they might find. What had once been just a tiny spot on a map now held all their focus. As the boat reached the shore, the weight of the moment settled heavily on them. Stepping onto land, they immediately spotted signs that someone had been there. A homemade raft, built from driftwood and tied together with fraying rope, lay half-buried near the waterline. A few pieces of torn clothing fluttered in the wind nearby. The items were worn and weathered, but they were enough to send a wave of urgency through the team. Someone had made it here. The scene was haunting in its quietness. The raft spoke of someone trying to stay alive. The tattered clothes, worn down by wind and rain, hinted at a struggle against the elements. These early signs fueled the searchers with even more drive. This wasn't just a possibility anymore. It felt real. They pushed deeper into the island, following the silent signs of survival. They moved inland with care, watching every step. The wild terrain pushed back, thick underbrush, uneven ground, and branches clawing at them. But they pressed on, their focus locked in. They looked for anything: footprints, scraps, a sound. The island, once quiet and untouched, now echoed with the rustle and calls of the search. Then, in a small clearing, they found something, a rough shelter built from sticks and leaves. Not far from it, the remains of a fire sat cold, its ashes still clinging to bits of warmth. The sight hit them hard. Someone had definitely been living here. Each discovery added another piece to the puzzle, painting a clearer picture of someone's effort to stay alive. They kept moving, and the island slowly gave up more of its secrets. Muddy footprints marked the ground, creating a faint trail. These signs, simple but powerful, showed a deep will to keep going. As they followed the prints, more signs appeared, making the story clearer with every step. Someone had fought hard to survive here. In another clearing, they found the remains of small meals, empty shellfish shells catching the light. Nearby, a clever setup of leaves and sticks had been arranged to gather rainwater. These weren't just random objects. They were proof of someone thinking, planning, trying. It was clear. Someone had gone to great lengths to meet the most basic needs. Each discovery carried quiet meaning. The pieces of food, the handmade tools, all told a story of long, lonely days and nights. It made the team pause and think about the strength it must have taken to make it through even one of those nights. And yet, someone had. That thought kept the team moving. As they found more signs, their sense of purpose deepened. Every clue felt like another step closer. A fragile but growing hope wove through their efforts, the thought that maybe, just maybe, Daniel was still out there, waiting to be found. That fragile thread of hope clung to them, thick in the air like the island's damp mist. With every new sign they uncovered, that hope grew stronger, driving them to keep going, to check every shadow, every inch, for something or someone. The clear signs of Daniel's fight to survive struck a deep chord. The team saw in his effort a reflection of their own, a shared refusal to give up. That shared drive kept them moving forward, no matter how hard the search became. Then, hidden within a quiet cove, they found something they hadn't dared to hope for. A cave, its entrance partly camouflaged by overgrown brush. Inside, away from the harsh weather and crashing waves, lay Daniel. He was thin, weak, but alive. When he saw them, his eyes filled with disbelief and relief all at once. The team knelt around him, taking in the sight. For a moment, time stood still. Just the sound of breathing and waves outside. "Thank you," Daniel whispered, his voice dry and barely audible. Just 2 words, but they echoed through the space like a full story. The tension that had gripped everyone for days eased in that moment. It was real. He was here, and he was alive. That quiet moment in the cave was filled with connection, raw, human, and unforgettable. Inside Daniel's small hideout were the clear signs of his long struggle. He had made tools. A rough bed of leaves rested in one corner. The walls showed marks from his time spent there, each one part of the story. It was all a silent record of survival, etched in dirt and stone. Here, in this simple place, they saw just how strong he had been, how hard he had fought to stay alive. As he gathered strength, Daniel began to speak. His words were slow but steady. He talked about the days spent stretching what little he had, of trying to stay focused on one thing: survival. Each morning he had hoped it would be the day someone came. Each night he had gone to sleep thinking of rescue. His story wasn't just about struggle, it was about holding on when it felt impossible. Daniel's rescue became something bigger than a mission. It became a reminder of what people are capable of. His story of survival against all odds touched everyone who heard it. It reminded them of how far determination can take someone, and how even in the worst situations, there's always a chance to hold on. It was a powerful moment, not just for the search team, but for everyone back home. The trip back from the island felt like a dream. Daniel was carefully looked after as the boat headed toward land. At the hospital, doctors moved quickly to care for him. Meanwhile, word had already spread, and people in town waited anxiously for updates. The community that had feared the worst now clung to hope, standing by for any news. Outside the hospital, people started to gather. It wasn't planned, but they came anyway. Friends, neighbors, old classmates, everyone who knew Daniel stood together, their faces full of emotion. They weren't just curious, they were connected. They had worried together, searched together, and now waited together. That crowd said everything about the strength of their town. When Jake finally saw his brother, everything else faded away. He ran to Daniel's side, and the two hugged, tight and emotional. There were no perfect words for a moment like that. Just tears, just laughter, just that deep sense of relief that comes when something you feared had been lost is found again. That hug said everything that needed to be said. In the days that followed, one feeling stood out above all: gratitude. Daniel and Jake made it a point to thank Marvin and Lena, whose photo had started it all. It was more than just a thank you. It was recognition of how their simple moment turned into something life-changing. The whole community joined in that gratitude, deep and heartfelt. What began as a peaceful fishing trip for Marvin and Lena became something much bigger. That one photo, once just a happy memory, had become a symbol of hope, of survival, of connection. It reminded everyone how fast things can change, and how even the smallest moment can change everything. Thank you for watching this incredible story of survival and community. If this touched you in any way, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more true stories to light.